let's continue on with a great story from the WarZone. Our good friends who we are strengthening relations with every day, the Indians over in South Asia. They've built their first indigenous aircraft carrier. Now, the Indian Navy has had aircraft carriers for decades. They would buy or lease vessels, including submarines, from Russia, the old Soviet Union. They did that with one of their aircraft carriers. This one they built on their own from the ground up. They designed it on their own. They used some GE, American-made engines, but they took those engines and put them in there and installed it and created basically an Indian aircraft carrier that looks pretty capable. Let's go over what this thing can do. Story written in the WarZone by Thomas Nudick. He says, India has joined a select group of countries who have designed and built their own aircraft carriers. With its first indigenous aircraft carrier, IAC, named INS Vikrant, having begun sea trials today. This is from August 4th. So on August 4th, they had started sea trials, apparently. While the program has suffered delays and cost overruns, as almost every military project does, the milestone is still a significant one for the Indian Navy and its air arm, and is in the next step towards India fielding its own planned multiple carrier force. There's a picture of it there. With almost all construction work on the warship now complete, Vikrant can commence at-sea trials, the propulsion and power generation equipment already having been tested while in harbor. So that's common. You do pierside trials first, test as much equipment as you can before you take it to sea, and then things that only can be done at sea are done at sea trials. The new carrier was most recently expected to have gone to sea earlier this year, but the schedule was interrupted by the pandemic. The first COVID voyage will now be used to assess the performance of the hull, main propulsion and auxiliary equipment, and others. Really good stuff. So I'm really happy to see the Indians building their own aircraft carriers. In peacetime, aircraft carriers are great messengers of diplomacy. The Americans have been using them for years, and they work. So as long as there's nobody shooting torpedoes, you're going to be just fine. Described by the Indian Navy as the nation's largest, most complex warship, the Vikrant was built at the Cochin shipyard in Kerala, the flagship of the Make in India initiative, which promotes indigenous projects to spur the country's economic growth and technological know-how, according to the Indian Prime Minister of Defense. Vikrant has more than 76% indigenous content, but it's been a long time coming. Cabinet Committee on the Security to approve construction of the new carrier began as long ago as 1990, with an expected slip date of 2014 or 18. It is now 2022. So it's going to be commissioned, they're expecting next year. So that's at least 5 months of sea trials, which I'm not surprised. They're being very realistic with the dates here. Unlike what we did with the Gerald R. Ford, we went ahead and commissioned ours into active duty service, that new aircraft carrier, a year or two ago, without it even finishing sea trials. The right way to do it is to finish sea trials and then bring it onto the roster of active ships. So here we have a little video. I wonder if we can see this. There we go. It's a little bit blurry, but that's some video and aerial footage of the ship going underway for sea trials, being surrounded by a lot of escort vessels, tugboats, going down a river. But this is really cool to see. This is a monumental moment in Indian history here, building their own aircraft carrier. Looks like the Kuznetsov. It's very similar to early UK designs and the what's the other one? Kiev designs. Yeah, Kuznetsov with the ramp looking thing. Let's see if we can look at this one. Ooh, hello. Oh, it took me to Twitter. There we go. This is a very clear photo of it. You can see. Yeah, it's very unique design. Look how big the island is. My God, that's huge. They got a lot going on in there. I wonder what they do in there. Huh. I don't know. So this has been all over social media lately. Continuing with the piece, it says the new vessel has a reported top speed of 28 knots and an endurance of 7,500 nautical miles. It's pretty respectable. It's powered by General Electric American-made LM 2500 gas turbines. We use these gas turbines on our ships. Very proven turbines. Easy to maintain. They can just swap them out pierside if they need to. on our ships. Has a length of 860 feet. She's a big girl. 200 feet wide. Oh yeah, thick. And a height of almost 200 feet. Yeah, I wonder how much she displaces. I'm sure it tells us here. Really, really cool. So congratulations to India. Building your own aircraft carrier is a big step forward in being a partner in the naval game. Italian shipbuilder Fincantieri served as a consultant for the design of the hangar decks. Unlike the previous, they already have an aircraft carrier. Unlike the previous carrier, the ship has elevators installed on either side of the superstructure. These also being moved to the deck edges on the starboard side. So they reposition the elevators a little bit. Can I click on that without? I'm always nervous whenever Twitter opens up because you never know what you're going to see. So here's an example of, this is the new one it looks like here. So where are the elevators at? Where are my elevators at? Aircraft lifts. Oh, right here. Okay. So they only have 2. American aircraft carriers have 3 of these. Okay. That's fine. In terms of sensors and weapons, the Israelis have supplied the ELTA ELM 2248, which is a 4 active electronically scanned radar arrays, which can be used for surface search as well as tracking aerial targets. The defensive weaponry is a mix of Israeli and Russian systems. So they pulled a little bit from different countries for some of the equipment. That's really, I mean, and it's weird that they're picking from Russian and NATO countries like the United States for the engines, but Russian and Israeli systems for defensive weaponry. Huh. But this is really what I want to show you right here. Watch this. They're going to be putting F-18s on this thing. That is an F-18 taking off from what could be a carrier without a catapult. It just needs that little ramp at the end, as this new ship has. Yeah, that means that it can be taken off from an F-18 can be taken off from anything that has enough room and has this ramp on it. So we're already trying to sell them the Super Hornet, which I hope they buy it. The Super Hornet's a really great, a great plane, a great design. These are some really cool pictures of, they got an old helicopter here. Oh, anyway, so yeah, congratulations. Yeah, F-18s of the U.S. to join the MiGs. So they're going to have MiG-29s and F-18s operating together on the same deck. This is like DCS, man. This is crazy. I would never think that you would see these 2 planes operating on the same team, but it looks like that's going to be the case. All right, what do you guys have to say in chat? The ski jump launch system? Yeah, it's where they go to the far point and they just, afterburn forward onto it. Yeah. India went full war blunder. You guys don't like this? What? I'm shocked. I think this is great. No, I think it's a good idea. They should buy all the F-18s. Yeah, we make a good plane. They should use them. What's the status of the not yet commissioned warships regarding the laws of war? I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know enough about the laws of war, maritime laws to answer that. So someone's saying that they have 64 SAMs and 4 of the AK-630s. I would believe that. That sounds reasonable for a ship of that size. But really cool. Hats off to India for doing this. It's been a long time coming. They've been trying to build this thing for 20 years, and they finally did. They finally got it out. Good job not giving up, I mean, eventually there comes a point where you've put so much money and time into it, you might as well get something back out of it. See, Tarpo says the Indian Navy intends to develop a new twin-engine fighter to operate from that carrier. Yeah, they want to build their own planes too, then their own weapon systems. And they're doing it right. They're doing it in steps. They couldn't build everything themselves, or they could have, but they would not have commissioned it. It wouldn't be ready now if they had tried to do that. So they got the ship itself done, put on the Israeli-Russian weapons, some American planes. They used the GE LM 2500 gas turbines, and the ship is ready now. Now they can take that next step and build their own planes, build their own defensive systems, and add those on to the next carrier or the next ships. Yeah, they're quickly becoming a strong naval power, and they are a strong partner with the United States, which is a big shift for India, because during the Cold War, we didn't have very good ties with India. Russia had better ties with India than we did. So this is a success for NATO and the United States. Vulcan Rider said, and hopefully they'll be able to stand off against China. I'm hoping that they will help us with China, because China doesn't show any signs of being deterred at this point, which is very concerning. So continuing with the theme of aircraft carriers, though, let's talk about our very own Gerald R. Ford. Finally finished its third and final full shock test off the coast of Jacksonville Sunday, just yesterday. This coming at us from navalnews.com. The author is Martin Manaranche. Sorry if I butchered that last name, but Martin says, shock trials validate a ship's, where does it start? Let's start here. USS Gerald R. Ford CVN 78 successfully conducted a third explosive event off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, the 8th of August, marking the completion of the ship's full ship shock trials, or FSST. So this is the third one. And look at the size of the plume. This ship is enormous, and the plume makes it look small. I mean, this thing is blowing hundreds of feet into the air. No fish were injured in the testing of the ship, by the way. Everything's fine. Okay, the shock trials validate the ship's shock hardness and ability to sustain operations in a simulated combat environment using live ordnance. During a 4-month test evolution, the first in-class aircraft carrier withstood the impact of a 40,000-pound underwater blast released at distances progressively closer to the ship. So 40,000 pounds 3 times over 3 tests, each one getting a little bit closer to the ship. Insane. And this is a great photo of the detonation underwater before the plume comes up. Look at the white blue glow the water has. That's a lot of energy about the surface right there. CVN 78 is returning to the Tidewater area for a 6-month planned incremental availability, or PIA. As the PIA begins, teams will conduct additional detailed inspections assessing any damage sustained during the shock, continuing modernizing and maintenance work in advance of the workups for the ship's deployment next year. Yay! So she's finally going to be deployed. After all the hand rigging we've done and finger pointing, and it was a bit of a disaster, to be honest with you, but that's all behind us now. She's operational now. She's going to deploy next year. And she's a beast of a ship. She is so big. It's the biggest one we've ever built. And so she's fast, carries a ton of planes, and crew, of course. So we look forward to having her in the fleet. I am honestly excited about that, as I've given this program hell on this channel. And so it's time for me to give it some credit now that it's gone through that period of, fixing things and improving equipment that just didn't work, or changing out equipment that just didn't work. There's the plume right there. Look at that. Look how clean and white. That's a lot of steam, by the way, pushing that water up. Yeah, it's not just kinetic energy. It's also steam. And then this picture, this gives you an idea of how big that blast was. Look, it's about at least half the length of the ship itself. Yeah, pretty amazing stuff. What's the capability over the Nimitz class? More of everything. It can sustain more aircraft, air operations, and it can hold more aircraft inside of it too. So they don't get real specific about that stuff. It's just, if you had to sum it up in one word, it's just more, more of everything. Let's see what this says here. Who's this from? Ford's commanding officer writes, okay, this is the CO. He says, safety was always driving consideration throughout the shock trials. So once we were ready and in position, pausing the countdown to the shot could really test our focus and persistence. So they don't just willy-nilly blow this stuff up. It does have to be certain sea conditions. And they will not explode that if there's mammals in the way, like whales and dolphins and stuff like that. They get all those animals, or make sure that they're nowhere near the blast, so they aren't impacted by it, or killed by it, and then they blow it up. So there's a lot of environmental factors that go into this. So sometimes they can sit here and just wait, for a long period of time, which is apparently what happened. That's not surprising. In spite of months of detailed preparation, you can't always count on the weather. I guess in this case, weather was more the concern than anything else. But the crew hung in there and showed the great tenacity and professionalism reflected of their pride in our warship. So many pieces had to fall into place to execute the FSST within the testing window. Success required equal measures of technical expertise, trust, courage, traits you'll find in great supply in Warship 78. Throughout the entire Ford shock trial team, the shots have only strengthened my confidence in the durability of the ship and the excellence of the crew. Very, very good. Very good statement by the captain there. What do you guys think? Let's see what chat thinks about this. Cold Warrior says a good shock test would have been anchoring it in the St. Johns River near the Gator Bowl during a Florida-Georgia game. Yeah, anybody that's been to one of those games knows it gets a little rowdy, and they're very fun. Les White says they set off a bunch of what amounts to big firecrackers. Well, listen, that's a 40,000 pound firecracker, okay? I don't know if firecracker is a very accurate term, sir. Oh, you're saying they set off firecrackers beforehand to drive away marine life. They also use active sonar. If you transmit a lot of active sonar, the whales will tend to leave you alone. Yeah. But I'm sure they have methods like what you're talking about. You can't wait for the Enterprise. Yeah, the Enterprise is coming. There's going to be 4 in the initial build. I'm sure they'll eventually build more than 4. But they got the JFKs coming out. Then the Enterprise comes out. And then the Doris Miller is the last one that's paid for. I'm sure they'll pay more. Is that heavier than AdCap warhead? Oh, in terms of pounds? Oh, but the force. Well, in terms of pounds, it is. Yeah. So yeah. All right. Let's see what the next one is. All right. This is the last story of the day here. This one is, I was very skeptical of this program when we started this years and years ago, but it looks like it's coming to fruition. With this new company making sail-powered drones pitched as high-endurance submarine hunters. This is not the first time that this has been pitched to the Navy, but after reading this article, this one actually is feasible. This is the first one that I've seen that makes a little bit of sense. So from the piece written by Dan Parsons from USNI News, he says, National Harbor, Maryland. The Navy could use one of the world's oldest technologies to defeat one of the newest by launching autonomous sailing drones to find and track enemy subs. Sail Drone, that's a company name, is marketing its unmanned surface vessels outfitted with composite rigid wind sails as a persistent reconnaissance platform capable of carrying sophisticated sonar equipment. The drones, which power their keel-mounted payloads with solar energy, can stay at sea for extended periods of time and perform an array of missions, according to Brian Kahn, Sail Drone's Vice President of Ocean Mapping, which is what this surveyor sailboat basically has been doing. They have about 100 of these out in the Pacific, doing bottom mapping right now. And that bottom mapping includes a fathometer, which is a sonar device producing an active transmission. So these little solar panels are producing enough power to maintain a sonar system, even though it's rather limited being a fathometer. You could power with that same amount of energy a passive sonar system, including a towed array, if you had enough of these solar panels, to have these things just autonomously sail the Pacific Ocean. To start, you could put them all over the world eventually. And these would be like little, almost like picket ships saying, hey, we got a detection over here if you're interested, Now, these things are literally just mobile sensors. The interpolation of the data would still have to be done by either a human or an AI and a human. At this point, we don't have AI reliable enough to identify 100% that there's a submarine detection, right? We're very close to that, to be honest with you, but it's not there yet. Not enough to hang our hats on classification. So the data would still have to be transmitted to, say, a shore facility or another ship where it could be monitored. So you could have, a dozen of these things out in an area of water, covering the entire area, essentially, watching for enemy submarines coming in. And if you put towed arrays on these, they could be very good. It really would cut down on the manning requirements for large sonar surveillance. So from the piece, he says, from the defense perspective, we're using these to look for seamounts that might be a hazard to submarine navigation. It's a very low-cost way of going out in an area where some thought they might have seen something. We can go out there and say whether or not the seamount is there. So that's kind of what they're already doing. They want to increase that role to sonar surveillance. They're looking for a military contract. And it looks like they've got a good platform to do it. It says any of the sail drone models could carry passive acoustic sensors and transmit signals to a manned surface vessel. Khan says larger versions can tow a sonar array or other underwater sensor to hunt for enemy subs. It also can search for near surface or other surface of the water with hydrophone sensors or cameras to perform counter drug missions. I suppose. I mean, they're just kind of spitballing different ideas out there. But this looks like this is actually a platform that can survive high sea states. It's being used right now for bottom mapping. So they're out there for long periods of time without getting damaged or lost. So they do already have a job. Maybe they could also do some sonar work. All right, let's see what chat says about these. Les White says, the one thing I don't like about that is that these Chinese and Russians can go out and grab one of them and say that they got caught in the trawler net. Oh yeah, exactly. The one thing about unmanned vehicles in general is anybody can go up to them and jump on board because there's nobody there to defend the vessel, kick it off. And not that anybody would be interested in this, but the military technology that's going to be on these, if they do this, would be something that we don't want other people to grab. So yeah, you wouldn't want to use these anywhere near populated shorelines. I'm talking deep water, middle of the Pacific, 100 miles from anybody is where you would put these. This would be like a line of picket ships. This would be the new SOSUS system. All right, Bear Spirit says, it may not be looking for specific signals rather than relay signals of interest. Right. Yeah, those signals of interest. Right now we have an AI that does that for us. They on our sonars, the AI will say, hey, look at this frequency by marking it in certain ways on the displays. So that technology is already in use, and they could use that technology with an autonomous sonar system here, radioing the data to a human somewhere that then looks at that data. Yeah, we have that level of capability right now. And so I think this is a good idea. I say give it a shot. Let's pilot a program, give them 3 phases. Usually the first phase is design and concept. They've got a lot of that already complete. They could jump right into phase 2 pretty quickly because they've already got a functional model that's being used. That's really the end of the story right there. Okay, let's take one last look at chat, see what you guys are saying about this. Do you mean like the Titanic was discovered? Oh, one thing that chat's pointing out is that this is very quiet. I mean, if it has a sail, it does have a little motor on it, by the way. It's a little 3-bladed motor, but that doesn't always run. They just run that whenever they need to. But this sail here, sailboats generally are very quiet. I've heard some in sonar, and we didn't hear them until they were like going overhead. And sometimes the only thing you hear is the rigging. Like if they have the sail reefed so it flaps when the wind isn't strong enough, and you hear the little metal cables, you know, ping against the aluminum mast. That's often hollow, and it makes a little ping sound, almost like a wind chime, but it's very distinct for a sailboat. It's different than, say, an anchor chain. Sometimes that's all you hear. And if it has a rigid mast like this, you wouldn't even hear that. So these could be very, very stealthy submarine hunters. Very, very stealthy. I think it's a good idea. All right. All right, chat. Yeah, so that's the Naval News segment. We'll come back and do some more cold waters in a few minutes. All right, we'll be right back.